The research vessel moved slowly through the empty space of the outer rim. This was a lonely part of the galaxy where few ships traveled and even fewer returned. The crew had been on a routine mission for 3 months, collecting samples from dead planets and scanning asteroid fields. Nothing exciting had happened in weeks. Captain sat in her command chair, her silver scales catching the dim light of the bridge. She was tired. Her 4 eyes blinked slowly as she watched the main screen show nothing but darkness and distant stars. The captain had served on research vessels for 20 years, and she had learned to appreciate the quiet moments. But sometimes, the quiet became too heavy. The alarm changed everything. A sharp beeping sound filled the bridge. Navigator, a small creature with translucent skin and 6 delicate arms, jumped at her station. Her large black eyes widened as she read the data on her screen. "Captain," said, her voice shaking slightly, "we have detected something, a vessel. It is very old." Leaned forward in her chair. "How old?" "The computer cannot calculate exactly, but the metal composition and design suggest it is at least 400 years old, maybe more." 400 years. Felt her 2 hearts beat faster. Ships that old did not exist anymore. They had all been destroyed in the wars or broken down into scrap metal long ago. Finding one intact was impossible. But here it was, tumbling slowly through the void, a ghost from another age. "Show me," commanded. The main screen flickered and displayed the object. It was small, barely larger than an escape pod. Its surface was covered in strange symbols that no one on the bridge recognized. The metal was dark and from centuries of cosmic radiation. But somehow, incredibly, a faint power signature still pulsed from within. Chief Science Officer stepped closer to the screen. He was also, but younger than, with bright green scales and an eager expression. He had spent his entire career searching for ancient artifacts and lost technologies. This was beyond anything he had ever hoped to find. "That power signature," whispered. "It is coming from a chamber. Someone is inside that vessel, someone alive." The bridge fell silent. Everyone stared at the screen, trying to understand what they were seeing. A living being, frozen for 400 years, drifting alone through the emptiness of space. Security Chief broke the silence. She was a large species with thick skin and powerful limbs built for combat. Her voice was deep and cautious. "We should not touch it. We do not know what is inside. It could be dangerous." "Or it could be the discovery of a lifetime," argued. "We have to investigate." Raised her hand to stop the argument. She thought carefully for a long moment, was right to be cautious, but was also right. This was something extraordinary, something that might never be found again. "Prepare a salvage team," ordered. "Bring the vessel aboard, but carefully, very carefully." The salvage operation took 6 hours. The ancient vessel was fragile, and moving it required extreme precision. When it was finally secured in the main cargo bay, the entire crew gathered to watch the opening. Ran his scanning equipment over the chamber first. The readings confused him deeply. The biological signature inside was unlike anything in the galactic database. The creature had no scales, no exoskeleton, no visible natural weapons or defenses. Its internal structure seemed soft and vulnerable. "What species is it?" asked. Hesitated. He checked his readings again, then checked them a 3rd time. Finally, he looked up at the captain with an expression she had never seen before. It was a mixture of fear and wonder. "Human," he said quietly. "It is a human." The word spread through the cargo bay like a wave. Crew members stepped back from the chamber. Some made protective gestures from their home cultures. Others simply stared in disbelief. Humans were legends, stories told to children. They were supposed to be extinct, wiped out when their home planet Earth was destroyed 4 centuries ago. The Galactic Council had declared them a myth, a species that probably never existed at all. Some old records mentioned them, but those records were considered unreliable. Yet here one was, frozen and preserved, somehow surviving the death of its entire world. Medical officer approached the chamber with careful steps. She was a slender species with pale blue skin and large, sensitive eyes. Her hands trembled as she examined the control panel on the chamber. "The revival sequence is still functional," reported. "I can wake him up." "No," said firmly. "We do not know anything about this creature. The old stories say humans were violent, dangerous. They destroyed their own planet. We should keep it frozen and deliver it to the Council." "The Council will put him in a laboratory," protested. "They will study him like an animal. He is a living being. He deserves a chance to wake up, to understand what has happened." Looked at the chamber. Through the frosted glass she could see the shape of the human inside. He looked so fragile, so helpless. She could not imagine that such a soft creature could be dangerous. "Wake him," she ordered. Opened her mouth to protest, but the captain silenced her with a look, nodded and pressed the activation sequence on the control panel. The chamber began to hum. Lights flickered across its surface. Steam hissed from the edges as the temperature inside slowly increased. The frost on the glass melted away, revealing the human more clearly. He was tall, taller than most. His skin was a light brown color, smooth and completely unarmored. His head was covered in short black hair. His eyes were closed, but his chest began to move as his lungs remembered how to breathe. Then his eyes opened. They were dark brown, deep and intelligent. They moved around the cargo bay, taking in the strange alien faces staring down at him. There was no panic in those eyes, no fear, only confusion and a profound sadness. The human sat up slowly. His muscles were stiff from 400 years of sleep. He looked at his hands, then at the faces around him. When he spoke, his voice was rough and dry. "Where am I?" Stepped forward. "You are aboard the research vessel. You have been frozen for a very long time. I am Captain. What is your name?" The human was quiet for a moment. He seemed to be processing her words, translating them in his mind. Finally, he answered. "My name is Where is Earth? Where is my family?" No one could answer him. No one knew how to tell him that everything he had ever known was gone, that he was the last of his kind, that he was utterly and completely alone. Looked at their silent faces and understood. He did not cry. He did not scream. He simply closed his eyes and lowered his head. And in that moment, watching him absorb the death of his entire world without breaking, began to realize that perhaps the old stories about humans had been wrong. Perhaps they were not dangerous because they were violent. Perhaps they were dangerous because they could survive anything. 3 days passed since woke from his long sleep. He spent most of that time alone in the small quarters they had given him, staring at the wall or looking out the window at the stars. The crew watched him through the security cameras, worried about what he might do. But he did nothing. He simply existed, quiet and still, like a man who had lost everything but was still trying to find a reason to keep living. Medical officer visited him every morning to check his health. She was fascinated by his biology. Everything about him was strange and wonderful. His body healed small cuts in just a few days. His blood carried oxygen more efficiently than any species she had studied. His bones were dense and heavy, yet he moved with surprising grace. "You are very different from us," told him during one examination. "Your body seems weak on the outside, but inside you are very strong." Gave her a small smile. It was the first time anyone had seen him smile since he woke up. "Where I come from, we had to be strong inside. The outside world was always trying to break us." Wanted to ask more questions, but the ship's alarms suddenly screamed to life. Red lights flashed throughout. The captain's voice echoed through the speakers, calling all crew to emergency stations. Followed as she ran toward the medical bay, and together they learned what had happened. The syndicate had found them. There were raiders and pirates, cruel creatures who attacked research vessels and cargo ships for their valuable supplies. They had spotted during the salvage operation and followed it through hyperspace. Now, their attack ships surrounded the research vessel, firing weapons at its engines and shields. The battle was short and brutal. There was not a military ship. It had only basic defensive weapons, and those were no match for the raiders. Within 20 minutes, the engines were damaged and the shields were failing. Then something worse happened. A direct hit struck the engine core, damaging the fusion reactor. Chief Engineer, a veteran with scales and tired eyes, delivered the terrible news to the bridge. "The fusion conduits are misaligned," explained, his voice heavy. "If we do not repair them within 4 hours, the reactor will explode. The entire ship will be destroyed." "Then repair them," ordered. Shook his head. "The damage is in the lower decks. The radiation levels there are lethal. No crew member can survive long enough to complete the repair. We would need at least 6 hours of continuous work. Even the strongest would die in less than 2 hours at those radiation levels." Silence fell over the bridge. Everyone understood what this meant. They were going to die. Either they would destroy them or their own reactor would explode. There was no escape. Then spoke. "I will do it." Everyone turned to look at him. He stood at the back of the bridge, still wearing the simple clothes had given him. He looked calm, almost peaceful. Security chief laughed harshly. "You, the human, you are the weakest creature on the ship. You would die in minutes." "Maybe," said, "but I do not think so." He walked toward and looked at the damage reports on the engineer's screen. His dark eyes moved quickly, absorbing the technical information. Then he looked back at the captain. "On Earth, we built machines like this. I understand how they work, and my body," he paused, choosing his words carefully. "My body can handle more than you think. We evolved on a planet that was trying to kill us every day. Radiation, extreme temperatures, poison in the air and water. We survived all of it. We adapted." "This is not Earth radiation," warned. "This is concentrated fusion energy. No biological organism can." "Let me try," interrupted quietly. "If I die, you lose nothing, but if I succeed, you all live." Studied his face for a long moment. She saw no fear there, no hesitation, only determination and something else, something that looked almost like hope. Perhaps he wanted to prove that his existence still had meaning. Perhaps he needed to save something, even if he could not save his own world. "Go," she said. Started to protest, but silenced her with a raised hand. Nodded once and left the bridge. The lower decks were a nightmare. The radiation levels were so high that Evan's primitive equipment warned him to turn back immediately. He ignored it. He kept walking deeper and deeper into the damaged sections of the ship until he reached the fusion core. The work was hard. The conduits were heavy, some weighing hundreds of kilograms. Lifted them anyway, his muscles burning with effort. The radiation tore at his cells, damaging his DNA with every passing minute. His body responded by repairing the damage, fighting back against the invisible poison that filled the air. He worked for 2 hours, then 3, then 4. His skin began to blister, his vision blurred. Blood dripped from his nose, but he did not stop. He could not stop. If he stopped, everyone on this ship would die. On the bridge, the crew watched his progress through the few cameras that still worked in the lower decks. They saw him collapse once, twice, 3 times. Each time, he forced himself back to his feet and continued working, wept openly as she watched. Even, who had distrusted the human from the beginning, found herself unable to look away. "How is this possible?" whispered. "He should be dead already." "Humans," said softly, reading through old records on his data pad. "The ancient texts say they were the most stubborn species in the galaxy. They refused to die even when death was certain. They called it willpower." 6 hours after he entered the lower decks, completed the final repair. The fusion reactor stabilized. The engines roared back to life. The was saved. He collapsed on the floor of the engine room, his body finally surrendering to the damage he had absorbed. His heart stopped beating twice on the way to the medical bay. Brought him back both times, her hands shaking as she worked desperately to save the creature who had saved them all. For 3 days lay unconscious in the medical bay. His body was covered in burns and radiation marks. By every medical standard knew he should have died many times over. But he did not die. Instead, incredibly, impossibly, he began to heal. When he finally opened his eyes on the 4th day, the first thing he saw was Captain standing beside his bed. "You saved my ship," she said quietly. "You saved my crew." Tried to speak, but his throat was too damaged. He managed only a whisper. It was the right thing to do. Reached out and gently touched his hand. It was the first time she had ever touched a human. His skin was warm and soft, so different from her own scales. But there was strength beneath that softness. Incredible, terrifying, wonderful strength. "Rest now," she told him. "You are part of this crew now, and we protect our own." Closed his eyes and slept. And as he slept, the crew of the began to understand that the creature they had found frozen in space was far more than they had ever imagined. The last human was not weak at all. He was perhaps the strongest thing they had ever encountered. 2 weeks after the engine room incident, had fully recovered. Could not explain how this was possible. The amount of radiation he had absorbed should have killed him 10 times over. Instead, his body had somehow rebuilt itself, cell by cell, until he was stronger than before. She ran test after test, staying up late every night to analyze the results. Each discovery made her more amazed and more frightened. Human bone density was 4 times greater than crystal bone. Human muscle fibers were arranged in a unique pattern that allowed for explosive power combined with long-term endurance. Human skin, despite appearing soft, could heal from wounds that would permanently scar any other species. But the most remarkable discovery was something I'd never seen in any species before. She called it adaptation. The human body did not just resist damage. It learned from it. When exposed to radiation, cells developed better protection against radiation. When his muscles were pushed to their limits, they rebuilt themselves even stronger. Presented her findings to the senior crew in the conference room. And Captain all listened in silence as she explained what she had learned. "He is like a living machine that upgrades itself," said, pointing to graphs on the display screen. "Every challenge makes him more capable of handling that challenge in the future. I have never seen anything like this in my entire career." "This explains the old records," added quietly. He had been researching human history in the ancient archives, piecing together fragments of information from before the Great Collapse. The texts say humans survived ice ages, plagues, famines, and wars. They lived on a planet with extreme temperature variations, dangerous predators, and toxic environments. Instead of dying, they adapted. They became stronger. Crossed her thick arms over her chest. She had respected since the engine room incident, but she was still cautious. How strong exactly? What are his limits? Hesitated before answering. During the engine repair, the cameras recorded him lifting a collapsed bulkhead that weighed approximately 800 kilograms. He held it above his head for several minutes while completing a welding task with his other hand. The room went very quiet. 800 kilograms, repeated slowly. That would require 3 warriors working together. Yes, confirmed. And remember, he was dying from radiation poisoning at the time. His body was failing. This was not his peak performance. This was him at his weakest. 6 arms trembled slightly. What would he be capable of at his strongest? No one wanted to answer that question. Captain stood and walked to the window. She looked out at the stars for a long moment before speaking. The old records from the Galactic Council archive mention that humans were eliminated from galactic affairs. They say Earth was destroyed in a natural disaster, but I am beginning to wonder if that story is entirely true. understood what she was suggesting. You think the council lied. You think humans were intentionally removed. Think about it, said, turning back to face the group. A species that grows stronger from every challenge, that can survive environments that would kill any other creature, that can adapt to any threat. Such a species would be very dangerous to the established powers of the galaxy. Very dangerous indeed. The door to the conference room opened. Stood in the doorway, dressed in the simple crew uniform had made for him. His dark eyes moved around the room, taking in the serious expressions on everyone's faces. "You are talking about me," he said quietly, "about what I am." Captain nodded. "We are trying to understand you, to understand what humans really were." Walked into the room and sat down at the table. He was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with memory. "On Earth, we had a saying, 'What does not kill you makes you stronger.' We believed this deeply. Our entire history was a story of suffering and survival. Every disaster that should have ended us instead made us more resilient." He looked down at his hands, the same hands that had lifted 800 kilograms while his body was being destroyed by radiation. "We were not born strong, we were made strong, by pain, by loss, by the constant struggle to survive. Our planet was not kind to us. The weather tried to freeze us or burn us. Animals tried to eat us. Diseases tried to kill us. Other humans tried to destroy us." He paused. "We survived all of it, and each generation was stronger than the last." "But your planet was destroyed," said bluntly. "Your species is gone. You are the last one. How does that fit with your story of survival?" Met her eyes. There was no anger in his gaze, only sadness. "We were very good at surviving external threats, but we were not so good at surviving ourselves. We had the power to move mountains and cross oceans. We split the atom and touched the stars, but we could not stop fighting each other. Our strength became our weakness. We used our power to destroy, not just to survive." "You destroyed yourselves?" asked softly. "We helped," admitted. "There was a war, many wars actually, but one final war that ended everything. By the time I was frozen, Earth was already dying. I was supposed to wake up on a colony ship, start a new life on a new world, but something went wrong. The ship was damaged. I drifted off course." He spread his hands. "And here I am, 400 years later, the last human in the universe." The room was silent. Everyone felt the weight of his words, the enormous tragedy of an entire species erasing itself from existence. Finally spoke, "The ancient texts describe human weapons. They say you had the power to crack continents, to boil oceans. Is this true?" Nodded slowly. "We called them nuclear weapons, and yes, they could do all of that. We built them to protect ourselves from each other, and in the end, we used them to destroy ourselves." Captain leaned forward. "Could you build such weapons now, if you had the materials?" Everyone tensed at the question, even seemed surprised by it. "I am not a weapons scientist," he said carefully. "I was a teacher. I taught children to read and write, but," he hesitated, "I understand the basic principles. Any educated human would. We grew up with this knowledge. It was part of our culture, our history. We could not escape it." Stood abruptly. "Captain, you understand what this means. If others learn what he is, what he knows, what he can do, everyone will want him. The council, the syndicates, the military powers. He is not just a biological curiosity. He is a weapon himself." "I am not a weapon," said firmly. "I am a person. I have a mind and a heart. I choose how to use my strength." "And we will protect that choice," declared. She looked around the table at her crew. "Whatever was or was not, whatever his species did or did not do, he is part of this crew now. He saved our lives. We will not betray him to anyone." One by one, the crew members nodded their agreement. Even after a long pause, gave a single curt nod. Looked at them, these strange alien creatures who had decided to trust him, to protect him. For the first time since he woke up in this strange new galaxy, he felt something other than grief. He felt hope. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I will try to be worthy of your trust." Captain smiled, her 4 eyes warm with genuine affection. "You already are." Outside the windows, the stars continued their eternal dance, and somewhere in the darkness, enemies were gathering, enemies who had heard rumors of a human aboard the galaxy was about to remember why it had feared humanity in the first place. The Syndicate did not forget their failure. The pirates who had attacked and been driven away by engine trouble had reported what they saw: a research vessel with valuable cargo, easy prey. They gathered their forces and came back for revenge. 3 weeks after woke from sleep, they detected multiple ships approaching on an intercept course. 12 attack vessels, fully armed, carrying over 200 warriors. This time, there would be no lucky escape. Captain called an emergency meeting. The situation was dire. They had no meaningful weapons. Their shields were still damaged from the previous attack. They could not outrun the ships. Surrender seemed like the only option. "If we give them the cargo, they might let us live," said, her voice heavy with defeat. "We are researchers, not soldiers. We cannot fight them." Slammed her fist on the table. "They do not take prisoners. They will kill us anyway just for sport. We should at least die fighting." "Die fighting with what?" asked desperately. "Our security team has 12 members. They have 200 warriors. The numbers are impossible." Had been quiet throughout the discussion, but now he stood up. Everyone looked at him. "On Earth," he said slowly, "we had a long history of being outnumbered, of facing enemies with better weapons and greater numbers. We learned that the key to victory is not just strength, it is also surprise. They have never faced a human before. They do not know what we can do. I want to use that advantage." "What are you suggesting?" asked. "Let me into your fabrication bay. Let me build some things, human things, weapons that they have never seen and cannot defend against." The fabrication bay was a large room filled with machines that could create almost anything from raw materials. Engineers used it to make replacement parts and tools. Spent 12 hours there, working from memory, building devices that made the crew nervous just to look at. When he emerged, he carried strange metal objects that looked primitive and brutal. Tubes connected to handles, with mechanical triggers and spring-loaded mechanisms. He called them firearms, kinetic weapons that used chemical explosions to launch solid metal projectiles at incredible speeds. "They use energy shields," explained to who would be leading the defense. "Those shields are designed to stop plasma bolts and laser beams. They work by absorbing and dispersing energy. But these weapons do not fire energy. They fire matter, solid pieces of metal moving faster than sound. The shields will not stop them." Examined one of the firearms with newfound respect. "You created a way to bypass their primary defense." "Humans were always good at finding ways to kill each other," said, and there was no pride in his voice, only grim acknowledgement of his species' violent nature. The ships surrounded thee and demanded surrender. When Captain refused, they launched their boarding pods. Dozens of armored warriors crashed through the hull at multiple points, expecting to find terrified scientists cowering in corners. Instead, they found waiting for them. The first warrior through the breach was nearly 3 meters tall, covered in black armor that could stop plasma fire. His multiple eyes gleamed with cruel anticipation as he raised his energy blade. Shot him in the chest. The sound was deafening in the metal corridor. The bullet punched through the armor like it was paper. The collapsed, dead before he hit the ground. For a moment, nothing happened. The other warriors stared at their fallen comrade, unable to understand what had happened. They had never seen such a weapon. They had no defense against it. Then fired again, and again, and again. The battle became a nightmare for their shields did nothing. Their armor meant nothing. The small human moved through the corridors of the ship like a ghost of death, appearing where they least expected him, striking with impossible speed and accuracy. and her security team followed behind him, finishing off wounded raiders and protecting the civilian crew. They had never seen anything like the human's combat ability. He seemed to know where the enemies would be before they arrived. He used the ship's structure as cover, moving from shadow to shadow, striking and vanishing. And squad cornered in the medical bay. 5 warriors against 1 unarmed doctor. They laughed as they approached her, taking their time, enjoying her fear. Came through the ceiling. He dropped from the ventilation shaft directly onto the largest warrior, bearing him to the ground with savage force. Before the others could react, he had already shot 2 of them. The 4th warrior swung an energy blade at his head, ducked under the swing, grabbed the warrior's arm, and with a terrible grinding sound, tore it from the socket. The last warrior tried to run. He did not make it 3 steps. Stared at as he stood among the bodies, breathing hard. He was covered in alien blood. His eyes were different somehow, harder and colder than she had ever seen them. "Are you hurt?" he asked, and his voice was gentle despite the carnage around him. "No," she whispered, "and what are you?" He looked down at the dead, at the destruction he had caused. For a moment she saw something flash across his face. Shame, perhaps, or sorrow. "I am what I needed to be," he said quietly, "to keep you safe." The battle lasted 47 minutes. When it was over, 37 warriors lay dead throughout the ship. The survivors fled back to their pods and retreated to their ships. They had never experienced such losses. They had never been so completely defeated. The crew gathered in the main cargo bay after the fighting stopped. They were shaken but alive. They looked at with new eyes, seeing him not as the fragile creature they had first discovered, but as something far more formidable. Found him sitting alone in a storage room, staring at his bloodied hands. She approached slowly, her 6 arms folded nervously. "You saved us all," she said, again. Did not look up. "I killed 37 beings today, 37 lives ended by my hands. They would have killed us, they were monsters." "Perhaps," said, "but I am not sure that makes what I did right just necessary." He finally looked at her and his eyes were filled with ancient pain. "On Earth, we killed billions of each other. We were very good at it, too good. I had hoped that when I woke up I could leave that part of humanity behind, that I could be something better." Sat down beside him. "What were you before the sleep?" "I was a teacher," said. "I taught children to read. I taught them about stories and poems and the beauty of language. I never hurt anyone in my life." He looked at his hands again. "And now look at me." "You did not become this because you wanted to," said softly. "You became this because you had to protect people. That is not evil, that is love." Was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "On Earth we had a word for people like me, soldiers, people who fought so that others did not have to. We honored them even as we mourned what they had to become." He took a deep breath. "Perhaps that is my purpose now, to be the soldier that protects this crew, to use the darkness in my heritage for something good." Reached out with one of her delicate arms and touched his shoulder. "You are more than a soldier, you are our friend, and we are grateful for you, all of you, not just your strength." For the first time since the battle ended, smiled. It was a small, sad smile, but it was real. "Thank you, I needed to hear that." Outside, the ships retreated into hyperspace, carrying tales of terror to the rest of the syndicate. Tales of a creature that could not be stopped, a monster in human form that had destroyed their warriors like they were nothing. The galaxy would soon learn a new word, a word that would be spoken in fear and awe for generations to come. Human news of the incident spread across the galaxy like fire. A single human had defeated an entire raiding force. The story grew with each telling. Some said he had killed 100 warriors. Others said he could not be harmed by any weapon. By the time the tale reached the core worlds, had become a legend. The Galactic Council sent an official message to Captain, demanding that the human be delivered to their research facilities on the capital world. They claimed it was for his own protection. They said they wanted to study him to better understand the extinct human species. But everyone knew the truth. They wanted to control him, to use him, to unlock the secrets of human strength and adaptation for their own military purposes. The syndicate placed a bounty on his head, 50 million galactic credits, more than the value of most planetary systems. Every bounty hunter and mercenary in the Outer Rim began searching for the. And there were others who wanted him as well. Governments, corporations, criminal organizations. Everyone saw as a prize to be captured, a weapon to be acquired. Captain gathered her crew for a meeting in the conference room. The situation was serious. They were being hunted from all sides. "We have 3 options," said. "We can surrender to the council and hope they treat him fairly. We can try to hide, moving from system to system and avoiding detection. Or we can fight." "The council will not treat him fairly," said firmly. "I have read the old records. They fear humans. They eliminated them once. They will do it again if they get the chance." "Hiding will only work for so long," added. "Eventually they will find us, and we cannot fight the entire galaxy." Stood up from his chair. "There is a 4th option. I leave the ship. I take a small shuttle and disappear. Without me, thee is no longer a target. You can go back to your research missions. Live normal lives." "No," said immediately. Her voice was fierce. "You are not leaving. You are part of this crew. We do not abandon our family." "Is right," agreed. "When you saved our lives, you became one of us. We protect our own. That is not negotiable." Looked around the table at the faces of his strange alien family. The silver-scaled captain who had trusted him when no one else would. The young scientist who saw him as a fascinating mystery. The fierce security chief who had learned to respect him through combat. The gentle doctor who had healed his wounds and touched his heart. The nervous navigator who had offered him comfort when he needed it most. These beings had given him something he thought was lost forever. A home, a purpose, a reason to exist. "Then we run together," he said. "We stay ahead of our enemies until we find somewhere safe, and if they catch us, we fight together." Together, the crew echoed. The jump to hyperspace, leaving the Outer Rim behind. They traveled to distant systems where the Council's influence was weak. They traded their valuable research samples for fuel and supplies. They became ghosts, moving through the galaxy like shadows. Months passed. The bounty hunters never stopped searching, but they never found the. Captain knew the hidden paths between star systems, the forgotten routes that only the oldest spacers remembered. She kept her crew safe. During those long months of running, something unexpected happened. Began to teach again. It started with. She asked him about Earth history, curious about the world that had produced such a remarkable species. He told her stories about ancient civilizations, great leaders, terrible wars, and incredible achievements. She listened with fascination, her large black eyes wide with wonder. Then asked him about human science, explained the theories and discoveries that had driven human progress. Physics, chemistry, biology, astronomy. The knowledge that had taken his species from caves to the stars. Recorded everything, building a database of human wisdom that would otherwise be lost forever. Even asked him to teach her. She wanted to understand human combat techniques, the methods that had allowed him to defeat so many enemies. Showed her how to use surprise and terrain, how to turn an enemy's strength against them, how to win battles that seemed impossible. And asked him about human medicine, the secrets of the body that healed itself, the knowledge that had allowed humans to live longer and healthier lives despite their dangerous world. She integrated this knowledge into her own practice, saving lives that would otherwise be lost. Found joy in teaching again. It reminded him of who he had been before the sleep, before the wars, before the endless running. He was not just a weapon. He was a keeper of knowledge, a bridge between a dead world and a living galaxy. One evening, he stood alone on the observation deck, watching the stars drift past. Found him there, holding a data pad filled with information about Earth. "I have recovered everything the old archives contained about your world," said, standing beside him. "Music, art, literature, history. Billions of files preserved in ancient data storage systems. Your civilization is not entirely gone, its memory survives." Took the data pad with trembling hands. He scrolled through the files, seeing names and images and sounds he had thought were lost forever. Tears formed in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for saving this." "There were billions of you once," said softly. "All with your strength, your stubbornness, your ability to survive anything. How did you ever lose?" Was silent for a long moment. The question touched something deep inside him, a wound that had never healed. "We did not lose to anyone else," he finally said. "We lost to ourselves. We had the strength to break worlds, but not always the wisdom to know when to stop. We were brilliant and stupid, brave and cruel, creative and destructive. We were everything wonderful and everything terrible, all at the same time." He looked out at the stars, at the vast galaxy that his species had once dreamed of exploring. "Maybe that is why I am still here," he continued. "To remember what we were, and to try to be something better, to keep the good parts of humanity alive while leaving the bad parts in the past." Nodded slowly. "That sounds like a worthy purpose." "It is the only purpose I have left." The door to the observation deck opened, and the rest of the crew entered. They gathered around, looking out at the stars together. "We received a message," said. "There is a planet on the edge of known space, a colony world that has declared independence from the Council. They have heard about you. They want to offer us sanctuary." "Why would they help us?" asked. "Because they are rebels," said with a rare smile. "They admire anyone who stands against the powers that control the galaxy, and they are very interested in learning from the last human." Looked at his crew, his family. These people who had given him everything when he had nothing, who had protected him and believed in him and loved him. "Then we go there," he said, "and we build something new, something worthy of the memory of Earth, something that proves humanity was not just destruction and war, that we were also hope and courage and love." Captain set the course for the distant colony world, the jump to hyperspace, carrying the last human toward an uncertain but promising future. Behind them, the galaxy continued to whisper his name. Some spoke it with fear, some spoke it with awe, some spoke it with hope. Human. A species that had burned itself to ashes but could not be forgotten. A people whose strength had been their doom and their glory. A legacy that refused to die. And in the heart of that legacy, one man carried the dreams of billions. One teacher, one soldier, one survivor. The last of his kind, but not the end of his story. Looked out at the stars and smiled. The universe had tried to forget humanity. It was about to be reminded. The end.